They were one of the most talked about couples in pop culture. From steamy performances and red carpet appearances to heartfelt Instagram posts, Shawn Mendes and Camila Cabello seemed like the perfect match, young, talented, and completely in love. But behind the smiles and the carefully curated social media moments, there was another story quietly unfolding. A story of confusion, pressure, and emotional unraveling. Fans watched their relationship blossom from close friendship into what looked like a fairy tale romance. But as quickly as it began, it ended, leaving millions wondering, what really happened? Was their love genuine? Were the signs there all along? Or was this just another Hollywood love story doomed by the spotlight? In this video, we're going deep. Not just into the headlines, but into the songs they wrote, the subtle interviews, and the quiet moments that might hold the truth. Because sometimes, the real story isn't told in words, it's hidden in silence, in lyrics, and in the way people look at each other when the cameras stop rolling. This is the truth about Shawn Mendes and his breakup with Camila Cabello. And it's not what you think. Before the headlines, before the heartbreak, and long before the world started calling them Shawnmila, there was a quiet, subtle connection forming between two rising stars. Shawn Mendes and Camila Cabello didn't start with a fairy tale romance. Their story began in the background, backstage, on tour buses, and in studios, with shared dreams, similar struggles, and a friendship that would grow into something much deeper. They first met in 2014, when both were still at the very beginning of their careers. Shawn had just gone viral on Vine, while Camila was part of Fifth Harmony, fighting to stand out in a crowded pop scene. They were teenagers with big ambitions, thrown together as opening acts on Austin Mahone's tour. According to them, they barely spoke at first. But something clicked. The turning point came in 2015 when they released their first collaboration, I Know What You Did Last Summer. The song was written backstage, almost spontaneously, during Taylor Swift's tour. It wasn't just a duet, it was electric. The chemistry was impossible to ignore, and fans immediately began speculating about a possible romance. The two played it cool, insisting they were just friends. But there was more going on beneath the surface, even if they didn't admit it, not to the world, and maybe not even to themselves. Over the next few years, their friendship stayed strong. But the music they released separately started telling a different story, one filled with longing, confusion, and hidden feelings. Camila's 2019 album Romance featured a song called Should Have Said It, a sharp, emotional track directed at someone who only admitted their feelings after she had already moved on. The lyrics were bold. So you want me now? That's funny. 'Cause you didn't give a back then. Fans were quick to connect the dots, suggesting it was about Shawn and the complicated timing between them. Shawn, meanwhile, wasn't shy about admitting that nearly every song he wrote during those years was inspired by Camila. In his Netflix documentary, In Wonder, he even says, I don't think she knows that, but every song I've ever written is about her. That kind of emotional honesty doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from a place of deep, unspoken attachment, something that had clearly been building for years. Their relationship was one of those rare ones where love, music, and timing were constantly intertwined. They were close, then distant. Friends, then maybe more. But it wasn't until 2019, after nearly 5 years of writing songs around each other, that everything changed. The release of Señorita in summer 2019 made it official, even before they said a word. The chemistry in the video was undeniable. The lyrics, the body language, the tension, it all confirmed what fans had been hoping for. Shawn and Camila were finally together. And when the paparazzi photos and Instagram posts followed, it was clear this wasn't just a publicity stunt. It was real, or at least it seemed that way. From childhood friends to pop's golden couple, their story was one that felt meant to be. But what looked like the perfect love story on the outside was, in reality, much more complicated on the inside. And soon, the cracks would start to show. Once Shawn Mendes and Camila Cabello officially stepped into the spotlight as a couple, it felt like the entire internet stopped to watch. Suddenly, they weren't just two individual artists with powerful fan bases. They were the couple. The golden pair of pop, young, talented, and visibly in love. Or at least, that's what we all believed. Every move they made was public. From steamy performances to spontaneous paparazzi shots of them walking dogs or sipping coffee in hoodies, their relationship quickly became one of the most talked about in pop culture. And for a while, it really did seem perfect. They were posting sweet messages on Instagram, calling each other soulmates in interviews, and even spending quarantine together during the COVID-19 lockdown in 2020. What more proof could fans ask for? There was a sense of comfort in watching them, like watching two best friends who finally got the timing right. Their moments felt genuine. Shawn would talk about how Camila helped him deal with anxiety and opened up his emotional world. Camila described Shawn as her person, someone who had always been there for her even before they fell in love. It was the kind of relationship that looked like it could last forever. But here's the thing about picture-perfect love stories. Sometimes they're more about how they look than how they feel. The public saw a tightly curated version of their romance, the cuddles, the kisses, the vacations, the coordinated red carpet appearances. But what we didn't see were the arguments, the doubts, the late-night conversations filled with uncertainty and pressure. Those things never make it to Instagram. There were subtle clues that not everything was as effortless as it appeared. For one, the media couldn't get enough of them, and that brought a different kind of pressure. Every kiss was scrutinized. Every distant look became a headline. People even mocked the way they kissed or walked, turning their real relationship into meme content. Suddenly, a private love story had become public property, and that's a lot for anyone to handle, especially two young people still trying to figure themselves out. Even in their interviews, if you looked closely, cracks sometimes appeared. There were moments when one would talk more openly than the other. Times when it felt like they were trying to prove something, not just to the world, but maybe even to themselves. Love in the spotlight isn't just exhausting, it can be blinding. And slowly, that perfect facade started to feel less like real intimacy and more like performance. But here's the most human part of it all. We believed in them. They believed in them. And maybe for a while it was truly that good. Maybe the long walks, the songwriting at 3 a.m., the laughter, the tears, all of it was real. But a relationship built under constant observation has its own expiration date. Behind the perfect Instagram captions and polished interviews, two artists were navigating fame, identity, and a love that may have always been slightly out of sync. The world was watching their fairy tale, but in private, they were living something much more complicated. No breakup happens overnight, not really. And no matter how beautiful or romantic a relationship may look from the outside, there's always a story behind the silence. For Shawn Mendes and Camila Cabello, the cracks didn't start with a dramatic fight or a scandal. They started quietly, in the pauses, in the distance, in the way their names stopped appearing in the same sentence as often. In the beginning, they were inseparable. But as time went on, fans began to notice a shift. Fewer public appearances, fewer photos together. The chemistry that once lit up the stage and their social feeds started to fade, not in a dramatic, obvious way, but like a light slowly dimming. And then came the interviews. Nothing too revealing at first, but subtle things. Shawn would speak about needing time for himself, needing space to work through anxiety and self-identity. Camila would talk about emotional growth, about the importance of independence. They weren't saying it outright, but they were hinting that maybe they were growing in different directions. One of the earliest signs something had changed was how they talked about the future. At one point, Camila said in an interview that she wasn't focused on marriage or long-term plans. She was focused on healing, on self-love. Shawn, too, seemed to be in a place of reflection. He began speaking more openly about the pressures of fame, about how exhausting it was to always feel like he had to live up to people's expectations, including his own. Then came the music that as always. It spoke louder than words. Shawn's song It'll Be Okay dropped just weeks after their breakup was announced. It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was heartbreakingly calm, like someone trying to convince himself that letting go was the right thing. The lyrics were full of acceptance and quiet sadness. If you tell me you're leaving, I'll make it easy. It'll be okay. That's not the sound of someone blindsided. That's the sound of someone who saw it coming. And while the public was still processing the fact that the fairy tale had ended, insiders were already speaking out. Friends close to the couple hinted that the breakup wasn't caused by any one event. There was no betrayal, no scandal. Just two people who loved each other deeply, but found themselves at different emotional places in life. Some said they had been drifting for months, that the passion was still there, but the compatibility, the day-to-day rhythm of being in a relationship, was getting harder to maintain. It's easy to think of celebrity relationships as performances. But what people forget is that behind every headline is a real person. Two, actually. And sometimes, the most painful breakups are the quiet ones, the ones where nothing explosive happens, but everything slowly stops working. And maybe that's exactly what happened here. Maybe it wasn't anyone's fault. Maybe it was just life, messy, unpredictable, and painfully human. On November 17th, 2021, everything changed, not with a fight, not with a dramatic public meltdown, but with a quiet, coordinated message posted to both of their Instagram stories. It read, "Hey guys, we've decided to end our romantic relationship, but our love for one another as humans is stronger than ever. We started our relationship as best friends, and will continue to be best friends. We so appreciate your support from the beginning and moving forward." It was short, gentle, almost too peaceful. The kind of message that leaves you wondering, if everything's still full of love, then why end it all? But that's the thing. Sometimes love isn't the problem. Timing is, growth is, life is. The post was clearly written with care, no accusations, no drama. It felt honest, maybe even mature. But for fans who had followed them from day one, it still came as a shock. People didn't just see them as two artists who had fallen in love. They saw them as a symbol of something real, something sweet, something hopeful. And now, that illusion had cracked. The internet exploded with reactions. Twitter was flooded with heartbreak, confusion, memes, theories, and questions. Some blamed the pressures of fame. Others speculated about a PR stunt. A few even claimed the relationship had been fake all along, just another industry move to sell records. But for those who had truly been watching, the breakup made a strange kind of sense. You could feel it in the distance that had slowly grown between them. You could hear it in the music. You could see it in their eyes, even when they smiled. Still, it's one thing to suspect something's wrong, and another to see it confirmed. There was a finality in that post. A quiet, graceful end to a story that had once felt too magical to ever break. But just because something ends doesn't mean it wasn't real. In fact, the way they chose to part, with mutual respect, with no scandal, no public jabs, might be the clearest sign that the love was real. Deep and maybe still there, just in a different form. Over the following weeks, neither Shawn nor Camila gave detailed interviews about the breakup. They didn't go on podcast event. They didn't write lengthy captions or diss tracks. Instead, they did what artists do. They let the music speak. And if you really listen, if you really pay attention, the story they never told directly is all there. In the lyrics, that I end the pauses, that I end the way their voices sound a little different now, a little older, a little heavier, a little wiser. Their breakup wasn't loud, that IT wasn't messy, that IT was soft, sad, and in some strange way, beautifully human. When a relationship ends, especially one lived so publicly, the silence that follows can feel deafening. For Shawn Mendes and Camila Cabello, the days and weeks after their breakup weren't filled with headlines or scandal. They were filled with space, with reflection, and with music. For Shawn, that reflection came almost immediately, in the form of a song. Just weeks after the announcement, he released It'll Be Okay, a piano-driven ballad that felt less like a breakup anthem and more like a private journal entry accidentally left open. There was no blame, no bitterness, just a soft kind of heartbreak, the kind that hurts precisely because you still care. The lyrics were devastating in their honesty. If you tell me you're leaving, I'll make it easy. It'll be okay. It didn't sound like someone angry. It sounded like someone letting go of something they didn't want to lose, but knew they had to. In interviews that followed, Shawn began to open up not just about the relationship, but about what it felt like to suddenly be alone after building your life around someone else. He admitted there were nights he struggled to even get out of bed. He spoke candidly about anxiety, about the pressure to keep going, to keep performing, even when your heart isn't in it. It was raw, vulnerable, and deeply relatable. Camila, in her own way, was going through a similar journey. While she stayed quieter about the breakup itself, her music started shifting. Songs like Bam Bam, released in early 2022, gave a glimpse into her emotional state, a mix of resilience and sadness, learning how to dance through the chaos. In the track, she sings, "You said you hated the ocean, but you're surfing now," a line many took as a direct reference to Shawn. It wasn't bitter, it was observational, almost amused, like someone learning how to laugh through pain. Both of them seemed to throw themselves into self-work. Camila started speaking more about mental health, therapy, and inner healing. She focused on rebuilding her sense of identity outside of the relationship, something she admitted she had lost a bit during those intense years. Shawn, too, leaned into solo time. Nature walks, cold plunges, spiritual growth. He took a break from touring, canceled shows to protect his mental health, and reminded the world, and maybe himself, that it's okay to pause, to feel the reset. But perhaps the most telling thing about what happened after the breakup was that they never tried to erase each other. There were no unfollows, no public shade, no petty swipes in interviews. Just quiet respect. And then, in 2023, they were seen together again. Photos started circulating of Shawn and Camila reconnecting at Coachella. Laughing, hugging, kissing. Fans were shocked, hopeful, confused. Were they back together? Was it closure? Was it just a moment of nostalgia in the middle of a music festival? Neither of them confirmed anything, and maybe that was the point. Because by that time, things had changed. They weren't the teenagers who met backstage anymore. They weren't the pop world's golden couple. They were just two people who had loved each other deeply, walked away, and maybe, just maybe, found their way back to each other, even if only for a night. What happened after the breakup wasn't explosive or dramatic. It was human, quiet, full of healing, music, and moments of growth. And maybe that's what made it beautiful. From the outside, Shawn Mendes and Camila Cabello's relationship looked like a love story. and their breakup like a peaceful, mutual decision. But behind every public statement is a much more complicated reality. And according to those closest to them, things weren't always as simple as they seemed. While the couple never aired their dirty laundry in interviews or online, people around them, insiders, mutual friends, collaborators, began to share quiet pieces of the puzzle. Some said the breakup had been building for months, even before the official announcement. That while they still loved each other, their lives had started moving in different directions. Camila was ready to slow down, find emotional stability, even consider what came after fame. Shawn, on the other hand, was still chasing momentum, growing his artistry, expanding his identity, figuring out who he was without her. One source said they had very different ways of handling stress. While Camila leaned into therapy, routine, and introspection, Shawn struggled more with the emotional weight of it all, often feeling lost, anxious, and overstimulated. Their love wasn't the issue, but their timing, that's another story. And then, of course, there were the theories, not from friends, but from the outside world. Some speculated that their relationship had been, at least partly, a PR move. The timing of Senorita, the perfectly synced rollout of their public appearances, the well-placed paparazzi photos. To some, it all felt too curated, too convenient, too good to be real. But people close to them insist otherwise. That yes, the industry loved them as a couple. It was good for press, good for ticket sales, good for the brand. But the feelings, those were real. So real, in fact, that it made walking away incredibly painful for both of them. Others pointed to how much pressure they were under, even in private. Being together meant merging two huge fan bases. Every move they made sparked speculation. Were they fighting, engaged, breaking up, expecting a song together? The relationship had almost stopped belonging to them. It had become something for the public to consume, react to, even judge. One insider described it as falling in love with someone while a million people watch over your shoulder. And maybe that's the most honest explanation of all. That Shawn and Camila were two people who really loved each other, maybe still do, but the world around them became too loud, too demanding, too invasive. Even after their breakup, insiders say they stayed in touch. Not constantly, but respectfully. There was no cutting off, no bitterness, just space, growth, and maybe quiet understanding. When they reconnected at Coachella in 2023, it didn't come out of nowhere. Friends said there had been conversations before that. Memories, lingering feelings, whether or not it meant anything long-term. Only they know. But what everyone close to them seems to agree on is this: their love was real. Messy, imperfect, pressured, but real. And in a world where image often matters more than emotion, that's not something you see every day. So, what do we take from all of this? Was it just another celebrity relationship, born in the spotlight and crushed by the same fame that made it sparkle? Or was it something more, something deeper, more fragile, and in many ways, more real than we ever gave it credit for? Shawn Mendes and Camila Cabello didn't just date. They grew up together, in front of millions of people. They transitioned from shy teenagers with guitars and microphones into global superstars who tried genuinely to hold on to something human in a world that rarely allows it. And maybe that's the most complicated part of their love story. It didn't end because of scandal or betrayal. It ended because life happened, growth happened, and sometimes even the most beautiful love stories don't survive that. But here's what makes their story different. They never turned on each other. They never tried to control the narrative. They just let go gently, respectfully, honestly. And in the months and years that followed, their music became the map, not only of what they had together, but of what it took to move forward apart. Songs like It'll Be Okay, and Bam Bam weren't just breakup songs. They were love letters to a relationship that mattered. A relationship that changed them. And that's what's worth remembering. Not the headlines, not the rumors, not even the Coachella reunion, as surprising as it was. But the feeling, the fact that for a while, in between the cameras and the chaos, two young artists found something real. And when it ended, they didn't destroy it. They honored it. Maybe they weren't meant to last forever. Or maybe they still will, in some unexpected, quiet way. But whether together or apart, their story has already left its mark. So here's the truth about Shawn Mendes and his breakup with Camila Cabello. It wasn't perfect that IT wasn't fake. It was real that IT was flawed, that IT was love. And sometimes, that's enough. You're one of us. Stay curious, stay brave. Like, subscribe, and never miss a twist.